Hi, it's John Sicotte with the Brewer Mag podcast, executive editor for the magazine. We are about to put out the March-April issue with Wiseacre on the cover, so be looking for that. But every Saturday, you can find brew reviews here, and we are adding some brew reviews into the Brewer Mag podcast as well. So we want to welcome in Brendan and Scott from Alternate Ending Beer in New Jersey. Guys, thanks for joining us. How are things going for you this morning?
Good, going great.
Yeah, thanks for having us, John.
Awesome. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I like this idea that we do. I think we've been doing brew reviews now for almost 10 years. And I think when people hear brew review, they automatically just think about what's in the beer. But sometimes it's about what comes in the story of making the beer, selling the beer, making the beer profitable, or at least not losing your shirt in it. And when I heard you guys make a beer with saffron in it, I had to know more. So the Bomba Iberian Lager, you guys have about a year or so you've been making it now?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
What was kind of the genesis of this? I mean, we'll get into the saffron part, but I know you guys have some new neighbors, yes. Lita's restaurant, and that obviously had to be the inspiration.
It was. So before we opened up Lita, we went to Spain, a group of us, the executive chef, Chef Danny. Danny was on the trip, Chef David Vienna, and Ricardo, our beverage director, along with Neely and our som for the restaurant, Nick at Court Liquors. So, and Brian, our sous chef. So we all went to Spain for an inspirational trip. And while we were there, we went to Valencia to kind of research the home of paella, because this restaurant that we were opening was going to be a very traditional Spanish, Portuguese, Iberian restaurant that we actually had our welder build a hearth for the restaurant. So everything's cooked on open flame, charcoal, and wood in big cast iron pans. So Valencia is the home of paella. So when we went there, we did some tours and went to a very special market. And while we were in the market, we picked up some saffron because that's just the place to buy it. And we were sitting out on our porch at night, and I was talking to Ricardo, our beverage director, and said, we got to do a beer for Lita. What can we do? And we started talking about it. And, we'll talk a little bit about the process later. But we have a decoction system, which allows us to do a lot of interesting old school ways of brewing, one being a cereal mash, which we've never done before. So I had the suggestion to use paella rice. And I said, if anyone can do it, Brendan could execute it, because it's not your typical converted rice.
It's a lot of starch in short grain rice. I'll tell you that, man. It's a little more difficult to work with than some other types.
Yeah. So, but then how can we even make it more special? And then when we were in that market in Valencia and we saw the saffron, we're like, we have to add it. And it is expensive, but it's not as expensive when you buy it there. Still, there's different grades. I mean, there were some saffron that was thousands and thousands of dollars, and some were, fairly priced. We got a really nice one. We got to rub it and see how the color reacted. Different ones had a different color. It was really, really neat. So really, in Spain, in Valencia, the idea was born for this Iberian Lager, which I don't know if anyone's ever.
No, yeah, it's a new thing. We had talked about, well, do we call this a Spanish lager? But being more of a Portuguese restaurant, it made more sense for us to go with the Iberian Lager route. It just really, has a nice ring to it. It rolls off the tongue. It just worked out really well.
Yeah. And so we brewed it, and Brendan could talk about that. But it's been on tap next door at Lita for since they opened. It was the first beer that they opened with, and it's been on tap every day since. Yeah. And incidentally, Lita was just nominated for James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant in the country.
Yeah,
congratulations to the beer they have on tap.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, nothing to do with Chef David.
The cool thing is it's almost like you're inventing something new. How's the reaction been? Like, do people understand that this is such a unique type of beer that's being made?
I think some of our customers do understand, the technical aspects of the beer, but for the most part, our customers, they just want a really nice, clean beer, and this one in particular was kind of designed to pair well with food. So in our restaurant or in Lita, it's a very complementary flavor with a lot of the spicier foods that they have there, and it's been popular enough that it became a house beer of ours. So as opposed to being a one-off fun thing, now it's scaled up to a 20-barrel production lager, and it's on all the time.
Yeah, I think surprisingly, a lot of these, higher end restaurants are more focused on wine and cocktails. So I didn't really know what to expect, how much volume we would do over there. But we're replacing, a sixth almost every week there, and and people really enjoy it when they're there. So it's been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, and when did you guys decide to go from let's have something fun to open with to we can make this. We can put it on the 20 barrel. We can now. You guys are canning it. It's become. Is it like? Would you say it's a year round now? A staple for you guys? Okay, so what's the decision in that? Especially, and we'll get into that. But the cost has to be a little bit different when it comes to creating a list of this. Other than you got the special rice, saffron. It's a different cost than a regular American lager.
It is a little more costly than a regular American lager, but not by much. Saffron goes really far. So to be honest, I think we're about 12 to 14 grams in the whirlpool. So it's not a lot, but it still shows up just a little bit, and it complements the hops that we chose for the beer. The rice is a little costlier, but when you think about it, the amount of extract we get out of this short grain rice, it's so high in starch that if we get a full conversion, we get a really great extract yield. So at the end of the day, we're really maxing out our 20 barrel fermenters with about 23, 24 barrels in there for primary fermentation. So the yield is great. And back to your question about what kind of the decision to make it a year round beer, for me, it was kind of when we saw the whole package, once that hit a can, and we had such a great label design from our designer, John Turner. And just when it all came around, it just looked like something we had to have all the time. And for me also, I want to make sure that we're able to produce a consistent product. So once we did a second turn and I knew, okay, this is going to hit the same every single time, then it was kind of like, let's go. And then fortunately enough, Scott was willing to purchase 2 more 20 barrel horizontals for me. So now it's got its own home. It's got its own 20, and it feels good. It's great to have it around.
Yeah, and we also had to buy a pallet of the very special short grain paella rice, because we got a call one day. Do you guys have any paella rice? I'm like, no. They're like, we can't get it. There's a shortage of it. So we had our head chef call our broker and say, how much can you get? And he's like, I can get you a pallet. And so we bought a pallet of short grain rice. So we're probably the only brewery in the country right now with a sitting there with a pallet of Bomba rice.
That's fantastic. Well, take me through the technical aspects of this, Brendan, and the playing with decoction mashes. It's an old school technique, but a lot of home brewers like to get into it. A lot of breweries are like to be able to use the modern techniques in an old thing. I mean, is that what you're getting? You're kind of getting the best of both worlds to be able to create this?
Yeah. So fortunately, we have a great hard pipe decoction system, so it does make things a little bit easier if you do your calculations right. So our setup is a 2-vessel decoction system, but we have a mash lauter tun and a mash kettle. So I have a grain drop going into either vessel, so we can grain into the mash tun if we're doing a single infusion, or for the most part we're doing step infusion or decoction. So we'll grain into the kettle and we can do our infusions there and then move the mash around. With this particular beer, it's actually 2 mashes. So we're using the cereal mash as the decoction. So we'll take about 80% of the Pilsner malt and we'll do our first mash, which will go through a protein rest, a beta amylase, alpha amylase, and then that'll transfer over. And then we will mash in again with 10% of our Pilsner malt. So we have the enzyme and the conversion with all of the rice. That goes in at a gelatinization temperature of about 154 for the rice. I'll step it up to a little bit of an alpha amylase. and then I'll bring that to a boil. When we return that to the main mash, that will mash out the beer. So it's kind of, working that volume of that cereal mash so you have the right temperature rise on your main mash was a little tricky. And also on our first batch, we realized how heavy the starch content was in the short grain rice when it just like fused to the bottom of the kettle. But since then, we've been able to figure that process out. We've got a mixer in the kettle. So basically during that cereal mash boil, we're running our mixer almost as fast as it'll go to prevent any sticking. But it does work out really well for us. And that process, we get a little more richness out of the Pilsner malt when you do boil that grain. There's a little contribution from the rice, but I think your palate has to be sensitive to that. I can always taste the rice in a rice lager. I know not everybody can. But so after that mash, that lends us with a fairly fermentable wort, but I didn't want this particular beer to be super dry. So it finishes more along the lines of a Czech pale lager at just around a 4 Plato. So it's an 11 Plato beer to a 4 Plato, I believe. So that runs us about 4% alcohol. I think we're generally between a 3.9 and a 4.1. In the boil, we use Hallertau Mittelfrüh and Mandarina Bavaria. So I've kind of brought the noble character, but a little bit of that fruitiness in to kind of meld well with the saffron later in the whirlpool. And it just became really, really harmonious. It's balanced, it's very light, it's drinkable. But after you take a sip, you kind of think about it and you can pick all of those little things out, But if you don't think about it, it's just a crusher that goes well, really great with the paella over there. A little residual sweetness goes well with the spiciness or the richness of that food also. So, it just kind of hit, it's one of those things. It was just like, hell yeah.
Yeah. And the saffron, it doesn't, turn it red or yellow, but it gives a little bit of that golden hue to it.
Yeah.
I think it really lends itself to the final color just slightly enough to make it different. And it just looks so pretty in a glass.
Yeah. We should have one here right now.
Yeah, we should. Yeah. Breakfast beer.
And compared with the Maillard, you get that little color from the Maillard in the decoction, and then that little touch of color from the saffron. But a little goes a very long way. I'll mention that again, that it's about 12 to 14 grams per 10 barrel turn, which it's about a 12 barrel pre-boil. So it's about a gram per barrel or so. It's not a whole lot.
Sure. And it's funny because a couple of years ago, as guys in our homebrew club decided to do the 12 beers of Christmas. And one of those is a saffron triple. So I made it when I got to make my pick. I had never tasted saffron before. I had never used it in beer before. And in a Belgian triple, it definitely brings in that earthiness to it. And I've probably over saffron mine because I'm just buying the little Spice Island, off the rack type of thing. Just dumped in like a bunch of threads, not knowing, it's so hard to count even in grams sometimes. So it was just like that much. But I had a friend from Sweden bring some saffron powder with home. And I didn't know it was powder until I opened up the package and went to, I'm like, oh no, I don't have threads to just grab. So I measured out and it dried out the beer so much this time around. Are you guys using like the powdered version then? The 12 gram?
We use the threads.
Yeah, we usually put in some wax paper and kind of, mush it up a little bit. So it kind of activates it a little, brings out some of the oils and stuff. So, but it's so cool to see what that paper looks like after you're done kind of rubbing it.
What did you know, like saffron flavor and smells before you? And obviously, you guys. We did
a few trial, with a few pints to see where that color change would happen and where that leatheriness would really come out. But for the most part, for me, I was thinking, I don't want this to get into that kind of earthy, leathery character. It still needs to be really pleasant, but be there, and I think, with the hop character in the beer as well, it just kind of keeps it harmonious and keeps that, earthiness masked a little bit with the noble hops.
Nice. Well, now that you've found something that's successful with this restaurant, is there something that you guys have in the works that you want to continue to do with Lita and be able to kind of lean into that Iberian and Portuguese influence?
Well, I think we found something we like and we're going to continue making that. And we've had some really great feedback. We just went on Ride with our Philadelphia distributor, and a lot of the accounts really like that beer. So we're going to start probably distributing it a little more. Hopefully looking for some high-end restaurants too to maybe partner with. But it led to another collaboration. So the parent company of Lita is Heirloom Kitchen, and they operate a beautiful hotel in Asbury Park. They operate the food and beverage program, and the owners of the hotel, Bridget and Jamie, they're really great people, and they wanted to do a beer with them. So we are actually working on a beer that we're going to brew next week. Again, something that's like a great culinary beer, but it's for their pool in the summer. But it's so we're going to brew it next week, and Brendan could talk about that.
Yeah. So we kind of wanted to be similar, without the European influence. But so this will be a nice rice lager, similar to the base beer, but we're using this great indie hop called Luminosa. So we just want to have this like elevated product, but still be kind of a poolside summery, feel, but still very much in balance. I'm all about balance. Even if it's a dry hop lager or a hoppy lager, and I don't think this will be dry hopped. It'll be a hoppy rice lager with a big late addition, but just so it's nice and balanced and crushable, low enough ABV to be around the pool, maybe a touch higher than the 4%, since we're not looking as much with food pairings, but more of pairing with the experience that they're having there. So we are excited about that, and my biggest fear, I guess, is that it's going to turn out so well that we're going to want to keep brewing it, and we say, oh, well, where are we going to put this thing? But it is a lot of fun.
It's also leading to another collab with our restaurant partners at Alternate Ending, Tallulah's. They operate a sourdough pizza place in Asbury Park. We're going to brew a beer for them. And then another restaurant reached out about doing it in a golf club. So it's interesting because you always think about collaborations, brewery to brewery. But now we're kind of looking at a different angle and going brewery and restaurant collaboration. So it's really been fun. I know it's been done before, but I feel like we're finding a really cool avenue because we toe the line on both industries. We're always beer first, brewery first, but we also have, exceptional kitchen run by Tallulah's. And I think that, when you're in both industries, you find friends in both of them. Mm-hmm. And while they're very different, but they're very aligned too.
Yeah, and I think it also helps elevate the product also. When you look at the beer, not that I'm making culinary inspired beers, we're making a beer that pairs well with these, these culinary dishes that these different restaurants and the experience that's happening there. So I really like the idea of how that elevates the product, as opposed to, two buddies getting together from different breweries and throwing a beer together. I think there's a little more thought and time put into this, a little bit, higher end ingredients, just making sure that it's, as, high quality as possible.
Well, very cool. Well, it sounds like you guys got some good stuff on your plate, and I'm sure you guys are celebrating the fact that this year finally New Jersey's kind of getting some laws changed. I mean, I could go in. I kind of know some of the stuff, but how is it affecting what the governor has been able to? I know he vetoed it because he wanted it to be a better law. You guys are finally putting that in. So how has it been affecting what you guys are doing at your brewery?
Well, so there are two types of breweries in New Jersey, restricted and limited. We're restricted. Those laws mostly help limited, which is great because we needed it. And, I feel a part of that. We feel a part of that too because, we were in on, the fundraising and everything. While it didn't help us as much, it was important for the whole industry to make this headway because what helps them will ultimately help us. But what it did for us that was really important, other than increasing our barrelage limit to like 100,000 barrels,
or like 300,000, it's crazy.
We'll never hit anyway. We'll never even hit the ultimate maximum, which was 10,000. Hopefully we will, but I doubt it. So it allows us to self-distribute, which is huge because perfect example, Lita is 10 steps away. I'm a partner there. I'm an owner at Alternate Ending. In order for me to give them that beer that we brew specifically for them, that I'm a partner in both, I had to give it to our distributor. They had to bring it to their bonded warehouse and then deliver it back and take 30% of our, cost. So now we're able, in the perfect world, to just take that and bring it over and save our margins.
Yep.
So that's a huge, really huge moment for us in our business and our growth, because self distribution is a huge part of any brewery. So when you have to use a distributor, and then some of them are great and really help grow your business, but certain instances like that where you could walk it across the street, I'd like to keep that percentage in our pocket.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, any small brewery that's distributing their product, the 3-tier system just kills you. There's just not a big enough margin to really make all the ends meet. We have to be able to sell our product, even if it is in a hyper local or a certain defined territory. But it just it makes a world of difference for the small brewer like us. We're brewing 10s into 20s, 2,000. I think our max with the tanks we have is 3,800, 4,000 barrels. We're still very small for the 3-tier system. So this is just a godsend for us to really be able to look at, make sure that our people are being paid really well. And we've got the margin on this beer to make sure that everything's covered.
It doesn't help that every time we add a new tank, it's a horizontal and not a conical. So, but it's a nice world we're living in with the transition to lagers. It's great.
I'm loving this industry right now.
Well, the guys, you guys are becoming a lager brewery, so enjoy that.
Definitely.
Well, appreciate you guys taking the time and just sharing kind of this really neat idea that you guys got going for you. Maybe we'll see some people inspired by this, wanting to know more about it, and we'll see that Iberian Lager as a BJCP standard at someday.
Hey, that'd be awesome. Yeah. Bomba would define the style.
Yeah, we're an open book too. Anyone can reach out and talk to us about brewing. Brendan loves to talk about brewing, and I love to listen. So we're definitely always open to talk.
Cool. Scott and Brandon, thanks so much for joining me this morning, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Don't forget, you can always check on brewermag.com. You can also see us on YouTube and listen to us on Spotify. And don't forget daily updates on Facebook, Instagram, and X. I'm Executive Editor John Sicotte for brewermagazine.com.